What if I told you that cheating doesn't just break hearts? It actually fractures the soul itself, creating wounds that follow you through multiple lifetimes. What if every act of infidelity carved invisible scars into your spiritual essence? Scars that must be healed across incarnations before your soul can truly evolve. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. This isn't just relationship advice or moral philosophy we're talking about today. This is something far more profound and unsettling. Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, who gave over 14,000 recorded readings during his lifetime, revealed spiritual truths about adultery that will completely change how you understand betrayal, karma, and the very nature of intimate relationships. Has this ever happened to you? You've witnessed someone cheat on their partner, or perhaps you've experienced betrayal yourself, and you've wondered why some people seem to attract the same painful patterns over and over again. Why do some individuals find themselves repeatedly drawn to unavailable partners? Or why do certain couples seem trapped in cycles of infidelity that destroy relationship after relationship? Casey's readings provide answers that go far deeper than psychology or relationship counseling could ever reach. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because we're not just talking about hurt feelings or broken trust. According to Casey's documented spiritual insights, adultery creates what he called soul scars, permanent energetic imprints that affect your spiritual development across multiple lifetimes. These aren't metaphorical wounds that heal with time and therapy. These are actual spiritual injuries that must be actively addressed through specific practices, or they will continue to influence your relationships, your capacity for love, and your soul's evolution for centuries to come. Think about this for a moment. Every time someone commits adultery, they're not just violating their partner's trust or breaking social conventions. They're actually creating karmic debts that must be repaid, often through experiencing similar betrayals in future incarnations. The cheater becomes the one who gets cheated on. The betrayer experiences betrayal, and this cycle continues, lifetime after lifetime, until the spiritual lesson is learned and the karmic balance is restored. Stay with me until the end, because what Cayce revealed about the energetic mechanics of infidelity will revolutionize your understanding of why certain relationship patterns seem impossible to break. He documented cases of individuals who discovered that their current relationship struggles were directly connected to infidelities they had committed in past lives, sometimes centuries ago. Souls who had deceived multiple partners in ancient civilizations were finding themselves repeatedly betrayed in their current incarnation, working out ancient karmic debts they didn't even consciously remember creating. But here's where it gets even more fascinating and disturbing. Cayce explained that when someone commits adultery, they don't just create karma with their betrayed partner. They actually form energetic cords with the person they're having the affair with, invisible spiritual connections that can remain attached across lifetimes, creating complicated relationship patterns that seem to defy logic and conscious choice. These revelations came from real cases, documented readings where people desperately sought answers for relationship patterns that made no rational sense. A successful businessman whose marriage was failing despite his material success. A woman who felt inexplicably drawn to married men. Individuals who seemed cursed to experience betrayal in every romantic relationship they entered. What Cayce discovered about these souls and their spiritual assignments will challenge everything you thought you knew about love, karma, and the hidden costs of infidelity. Let me share with you a transformation story that perfectly illustrates this hidden truth. In 1933, a wealthy textile manufacturer from Manchester arrived at Cayce's doorstep, completely desperate. This man had everything society told him should make him happy: financial success, social status, a beautiful home. Yet his marriage was crumbling before his eyes, and he couldn't understand why. His wife had grown cold and distant. Their intimacy had vanished, and despite all his material achievements, he felt spiritually empty. What Cayce revealed during that reading would forever change this businessman's understanding of his own journey. Through his psychic abilities, Cayce saw that in ancient Rome, This same soul had been a wealthy patrician who maintained multiple wives and concubines, deceiving each of them about the other's existence. He had used his power and influence to manipulate these women into relationships built on lies and false promises, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and shattered trust. The spiritual revelation was staggering. The emotional emptiness this man was experiencing in his current life, the way his wife seemed unable to connect with him despite his efforts, the inexplicable distance that had grown between them, all of this was the direct result of karmic debts he had created centuries earlier. His soul was experiencing the same emotional abandonment and spiritual isolation he had caused others in that previous incarnation. But here's where Cayce's guidance becomes truly revolutionary in terms of personal transformation. The psychic didn't just identify the problem, he provided a roadmap for healing that went far beyond conventional relationship advice or simple apologies. Cayce explained that genuine repentance from spiritual wounds caused by infidelity requires something much more profound than feeling sorry or asking for forgiveness through words alone. The healing journey, according to Cayce, demanded active service to those who had been harmed. This wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations of change. It was about consistent, daily decisions to serve others who had experienced similar betrayals, to become a source of healing rather than harm in the world. The businessman needed to understand that his current relationship struggles were actually spiritual assignments, opportunities to learn what authentic love and commitment truly meant. This revelation about karmic patterns and their impact on our present relationships opened up an entirely new understanding of why some people seem trapped in cycles of betrayal and emotional pain. The businessman's case wasn't unique. It was part of a larger pattern that Cayce documented across thousands of readings, showing how our past actions create the very circumstances we find ourselves struggling with today. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic and explore exactly how these karmic debts manifest in our current relationships, because what you're about to learn will give you incredible insight into patterns you might be experiencing in your own life. Cayce documented specific cases where individuals discovered that the people betraying them in their current incarnation were the exact same souls they had deceived in previous lifetimes, working out ancient spiritual contracts through present-day relationship dynamics. Write in the comments, "I understand the deeper pattern," if this revelation about karmic relationships is starting to make sense to you. This deeper understanding of karmic relationships reveals something truly extraordinary about the hidden mechanisms behind our most intimate connections. In reading 2943, Cayce uncovered a spiritual truth that completely transforms how we understand commitment and betrayal. He revealed that before souls incarnate into physical bodies, they actually make sacred agreements, spiritual contracts that outline the lessons they'll learn together and the ways they'll support each other's growth during that lifetime. Think about the profound implications of this revelation. Every marriage, every committed relationship, isn't just a social arrangement or emotional bond. It's the fulfillment of a cosmic agreement made at the soul level, a conscious decision by two spiritual beings to walk a specific path together for their mutual evolution. When someone commits adultery, they're not just breaking a promise made to their partner in this lifetime, they're violating a sacred contract that was established before either soul took physical form. This spiritual breach creates what Cayce called karmic entanglements, complex energetic patterns that persist across multiple incarnations until they're properly resolved. The impact of this violation goes far beyond the immediate emotional damage we can see. It disrupts the entire spiritual curriculum that these souls had agreed to experience together, forcing both individuals off their intended path of growth and creating obstacles that can take lifetimes to overcome. But here's where this gets even more fascinating from a spiritual mechanics perspective. Cayce discovered that adultery doesn't just violate existing soul contracts, it creates entirely new energetic connections that were never supposed to exist. When someone engages in infidelity, they form what he called energetic cords with their affair partner, invisible spiritual attachments that remain connected across incarnations, creating complicated relationship patterns that seem to defy logic and conscious choice. These energetic cords operate like spiritual magnets, drawing souls back together in lifetime after lifetime, often in circumstances that create confusion and emotional turmoil. The souls involved find themselves inexplicably attracted to each other, even when such attraction makes no rational sense or creates obvious problems in their lives. They might meet as colleagues, neighbors, or friends, but there's always this underlying pull, this sense of unfinished business that neither person can fully understand or explain. The behind-the-scenes spiritual reality is that these souls are trapped in an energetic loop that was created through the violation of sacred agreements. They're bound together not by love or genuine compatibility, but by unresolved karmic debt that must be worked through before either soul can move forward in their spiritual evolution. This is why some people find themselves repeatedly drawn to unavailable partners or stuck in relationships that bring out their worst patterns rather than their highest potential. Cayce documented countless cases where individuals discovered that their most challenging relationship dynamics were the result of these energetic cords formed through past life infidelities. The journey to freedom requires understanding not just what happened, but how to consciously break these attachments and restore the natural spiritual balance that was disrupted through betrayal. Now, I want to explore with you a specific case that perfectly illustrates how these energetic cords manifest in our current relationships, because the revelations from this particular reading will show you exactly how these invisible spiritual connections control our romantic choices in ways we never imagined. Write in the comments, "I see the invisible connections," if you're starting to recognize these patterns in your own relationship history. The perfect example of these invisible spiritual connections came through reading 25741, when a secretary from Chicago contacted Cayce in complete emotional turmoil. She was a moral woman, raised with strong values about commitment and fidelity, yet she found herself inexplicably drawn to a married colleague at her workplace. The attraction was so intense it frightened her. She couldn't understand why she felt such a powerful connection to someone who was completely unavailable and whose pursuit would violate everything she believed in. This woman's internal struggle represents a journey that countless souls experience without understanding the hidden forces at work behind the scenes. She felt like she was losing her mind, questioning her own character and values because of feelings that seemed to come from nowhere, yet felt more real and compelling than anything she'd ever experienced. Her mindset was torn between what she knew was right and an attraction that felt almost beyond her conscious control. When Cayce accessed her soul's history, the revelation was both stunning and heartbreaking. In 3 separate previous incarnations, this same man had been her lover while he was married to other women. Lifetime after lifetime, they had engaged in forbidden relationships, creating a pattern of attraction based on secrecy, betrayal, and the thrill of the forbidden. Their souls had become trapped in what Cayce called forbidden attraction patterns, karmic loops that kept drawing them together in circumstances that would recreate the same spiritual violations over and over again. The impact of this discovery completely transformed her understanding of what she thought was true love. She realized that this overwhelming attraction wasn't evidence of a destined soulmate connection. It was actually a spiritual trap that had been keeping both souls stuck in cycles of betrayal for centuries. Every time they came together in infidelity, they reinforced the energetic cords that bound them in these destructive patterns, making it increasingly difficult for either soul to break free and find authentic love. But here's where Cayce's revelations become even more profound in terms of spiritual mechanics. He explained that souls who repeatedly engage in adultery together create what he called spiritual static, a form of energetic interference that actually prevents them from connecting with their true soulmates. This spiritual static acts like a cosmic jamming signal, blocking the natural magnetic attraction that would otherwise draw each soul toward the partner who could truly support their spiritual growth and evolution. The hidden truth is that these illicit attractions feel so intense precisely because they're spiritually destructive. The soul recognizes the familiar pattern and creates powerful emotions to draw the person back into the same karmic loop. even though following that attraction leads away from genuine spiritual fulfillment. It's like being addicted to something that feels good in the moment, but ultimately prevents you from accessing what would truly nourish your soul. This secretary's case illustrates how our most compelling attractions can sometimes be our greatest spiritual obstacles in disguise. The very relationships that feel most meant to be might actually be the ones keeping us from our authentic, spiritual destiny. Now, I want to reveal to you an even more disturbing case that shows exactly how these karmic patterns play out when souls refuse to break the cycle, because what happened to this next individual will show you the ultimate consequences of remaining trapped in these spiritual loops. Write in the comments, "I recognize the spiritual trap," if you've ever felt inexplicably drawn to someone who wasn't available or right for you. The most striking case of karmic justice that Cayce ever documented came through a successful attorney from Boston who contacted him in 1940, completely bewildered by what seemed like a curse on his love life. This man had achieved everything he had worked for professionally. He was respected in his field, financially secure, and socially well-connected. Yet every single romantic relationship he entered ended in devastating betrayal. Without exception, the women in his life would cheat on him, leave him for other men, or simply vanish from his life, without explanation, often taking his resources and emotional investment with them. The transformation in this man's mindset began when he stopped seeing these betrayals as random bad luck and started questioning whether there might be a deeper pattern at work. His journey to understanding led him to Cayce, desperate to uncover why he seemed to attract the same painful outcome, regardless of how carefully he chose his partners or how generously he treated them. What Cayce revealed about this man's spiritual history completely reframed his understanding of personal responsibility and cosmic justice. In ancient Greece, this same soul had been a wealthy merchant who had cunningly maintained multiple wives and concubines, each believing she was his only true love. He had used his charm, resources, and social position to weave elaborate deceptions, keeping each woman isolated from the others while extracting emotional, physical, and sometimes financial benefits from all of them. The impact of these ancient deceptions had created a karmic debt so significant that his current incarnation was essentially structured around repayment. The hidden truth that shocked even Cayce was that the specific women who were betraying this attorney in his current lifetime were the exact same souls he had deceived in Greece. They were unconsciously working out the karmic balance by putting him through the identical emotional devastation he had inflicted on them centuries earlier. This wasn't random punishment or cosmic cruelty. It was perfect spiritual mathematics. Each betrayal he experienced mirrored the specific ways he had deceived these souls in his past incarnation. The woman who left him for a wealthier man had been the wife he abandoned when a more profitable marriage became available. The partner who disappeared with his money had been the concubine whose inheritance he had stolen. The decisions these women made weren't consciously vengeful. They were being guided by their soul's need to restore the energetic balance that had been disrupted by his ancient betrayals. The attorney initially struggled with this revelation, questioning why he should be held accountable for actions he couldn't even remember. But Cayce helped him understand that this wasn't about punishment. It was about learning. His soul had chosen these experiences to develop the empathy and integrity that his past incarnation had lacked. Every betrayal was an opportunity to understand the pain he had caused others and to make different choices about how he treated people. Now, I want to show you exactly how Cayce guided this man toward breaking free from these karmic cycles, because the specific practices he recommended reveal a roadmap that anyone can use to transform their relationship patterns and heal ancient spiritual wounds that might be affecting their current love life. Write in the comments, "I see the perfect balance," if you're beginning to understand how our past actions create our present experiences in relationships. Cayce's guidance for the Boston attorney revealed something revolutionary about the mechanics of spiritual healing that goes far beyond conventional approaches to relationship recovery. The psychic made it clear that simply feeling remorse or guilt about past actions, whether from this lifetime or previous incarnations, was completely insufficient for breaking these destructive karmic cycles. The attorney's genuine sorrow about the pain he was experiencing, and even his growing understanding of how he had caused similar pain to others, was just the beginning of his transformation journey. The hidden truth that Cayce revealed was that spiritual wounds created through betrayal require active service to heal, not passive regret. The attorney needed to consciously engage in actions that would restore the energetic balance his past deceptions had disrupted. This wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic acts of penance. It was about consistent daily decisions to serve these souls in ways that would genuinely help heal the spiritual damage his ancient betrayals had created. But Cayce went even deeper into the mechanics behind why this active service was so crucial for breaking karmic patterns. He explained that adultery doesn't just hurt people emotionally or violate social agreements, it actually corrupts what he called the creative force, the same divine energy that flows through all intimate relationships and connects souls to higher spiritual realms. This creative force is the sacred power behind all genuine love, spiritual connection, and soul evolution. When someone misuses this divine energy through deception and betrayal, they don't just damage their relationships, they actually impair their own capacity for spiritual awakening. The impact goes far beyond the immediate consequences we can see. Every act of infidelity creates what Cayce described as energetic static that interferes with the soul's ability to connect with divine love, authentic spiritual guidance, and their true spiritual purpose. The attorney's journey of understanding revealed how this corruption of the creative force had been blocking his spiritual development for lifetimes. His past incarnations' pattern of sexual deception had created so much spiritual static that his soul had lost its natural ability to recognize and attract genuine love. Instead, he could only connect with souls who were karmically obligated to teach him about betrayal through direct experience. This insight completely transformed his mindset about his relationship struggles. Instead of seeing himself as a victim of cruel fate or bad luck with women, he began to understand that every betrayal was actually a precisely orchestrated spiritual lesson designed to help him develop the integrity and empathy his soul needed to evolve. The women who had hurt him weren't his enemies, they were his spiritual teachers, helping him learn lessons he had avoided for centuries. Cayce's guidance for restoring the creative force involved specific practices that would redirect the attorney's sexual and romantic energy toward spiritual service rather than ego gratification. This process required him to fundamentally shift how he approached intimate relationships, seeing them as opportunities for mutual spiritual growth rather than vehicles for personal satisfaction. Now, I want to reveal to you the most shocking aspect of how this corruption of the creative force affects our spiritual development, because what Cayce discovered about the long-term consequences will completely change how you understand the true cost of sexual betrayal. Write in the comments, "I understand the creative force," if you're beginning to see how intimate relationships connect to our spiritual evolution. The most profound revelation about this corruption of the creative force came through reading 26:5-12, where Cayce explained something that completely revolutionizes our understanding of sexual energy and its connection to spiritual development. Most people think of sexual energy as purely physical, a biological drive designed for reproduction and pleasure. But Cayce revealed that sexual energy is actually the physical expression of the soul's creative power, the same divine force that connects us to higher spiritual realms and enables genuine spiritual enlightenment. This means that every intimate encounter is potentially a sacred act, an opportunity to channel divine creative energy in ways that can accelerate spiritual growth for both souls involved. When this energy is expressed within the context of genuine love, commitment, and spiritual partnership, it becomes a pathway to divine connection. But when it's misused through adultery, deception, or manipulation, it creates what Cayce called spiritual congestion, a form of energetic blockage that prevents the soul from accessing its natural capacity for spiritual awakening. Think about the profound implications of this hidden truth. Every act of infidelity doesn't just betray another person, it actually damages the perpetrator's own spiritual development by corrupting the very energy that could connect them to divine love and spiritual enlightenment. The impact compounds over time, creating increasingly dense spiritual congestion that blocks the soul's natural evolution toward higher consciousness. But here's where Cayce's revelations become truly alarming in terms of long-term spiritual consequences. He documented cases of souls who had habitually engaged in infidelity across multiple lifetimes, and the transformation he observed was deeply disturbing. These souls had actually lost their capacity to experience authentic love. They had become what he called spiritually hardened, their hearts so encrusted with the residue of past betrayals that they could no longer access genuine emotional connection. The journey back from this spiritual hardening requires entire incarnations dedicated to relearning the most basic aspects of authentic love. These souls often incarnate into situations where they experience profound emotional numbness, unable to feel the deep connections that others describe in their relationships. They go through the motions of love, but the actual spiritual and emotional substance remains elusive, like trying to taste food with a completely numb tongue. This spiritual hardening represents one of the most tragic consequences of misusing the creative force through repeated infidelity. The very actions that people pursue in search of pleasure, excitement, or validation gradually destroy their ability to experience the deeper fulfillment they're actually seeking. It's like a spiritual addiction that requires increasingly destructive behaviors while simultaneously destroying the soul's capacity to feel satisfaction from those behaviors. The behind-the-scenes reality is that these spiritually hardened souls often become trapped in cycles of empty relationships, constantly seeking something they can no longer access because their past decisions have damaged the very spiritual mechanisms that would allow them to experience authentic love and connection. Now, I want to share with you a specific case that perfectly illustrates this spiritual hardening process, because what happened to this individual shows exactly how the soul protects itself when it becomes too damaged to safely engage in intimate relationships. Write in the comments, "I feel the spiritual numbness," if you've ever experienced relationships that felt emotionally empty despite going through all the right motions. The perfect example of this spiritual protection mechanism came through a school teacher from Detroit who contacted Cayce in 1946, completely frustrated by her inability to feel anything meaningful in her relationships. She described her situation as living in an emotional vacuum. She could go through all the motions of romance, say the right words, and even maintain long-term partnerships, but she never experienced the deep emotional connection that others described with such passion and intensity. This woman's journey to understanding began when she realized that her emotional numbness wasn't just a personality quirk or the result of past trauma in her current lifetime. She had tried therapy, she had examined her childhood, she had worked on communication skills, but nothing seemed to unlock the capacity for genuine feeling that she desperately wanted to experience. The transformation in her understanding came when she stopped looking for psychological explanations and started questioning whether there might be spiritual factors at work. What Cayce revealed about her soul's history was both shocking and illuminating. In 7 previous incarnations, this same soul had consistently used her sexuality as a weapon of manipulation and control. She had been a courtesan in ancient Egypt, who destroyed marriages for personal gain, a noblewoman in medieval times, who seduced men to steal their property, and a wealthy widow in colonial America who manipulated younger men through sexual promises she never intended to keep. Lifetime after lifetime, she had perfected the art of sexual manipulation, becoming increasingly skilled at reading people's vulnerabilities and exploiting them for material, social, or emotional advantage. But the impact of these repeated betrayals had gradually corrupted her soul's ability to distinguish between authentic love and manipulative attraction. She had become so accustomed to using intimate connection as a tool for control that her soul had literally forgotten what genuine love felt like. The hidden truth that Cayce revealed about her current emotional numbness completely reframed her understanding of what she had been experiencing as a problem. Her soul's inability to feel deep emotional connection wasn't a defect or a punishment. It was actually a form of spiritual protection. Her higher self had essentially shut down her capacity for intense romantic feelings to prevent her from creating new karmic entanglements while she was still operating from manipulative patterns. This spiritual protection was preventing her from unconsciously falling back into the same destructive behaviors that had characterized her previous incarnations, until she could learn to approach relationships with genuine care and authentic interest in another person's well-being. Rather than as opportunities for manipulation and control, her soul would continue to limit her access to the intense emotions that had previously fueled her destructive behaviors. The revelation transformed her entire mindset about her emotional experience. Instead of seeing her numbness as something to overcome or fix, she began to understand it as a necessary stage in her spiritual evolution, a period of learning and growth that would eventually allow her to experience authentic love for the first time in centuries. Now I want to explore with you the specific healing process that Cayce outlined for souls in this spiritually protected state, because his guidance reveals a step-by-step pathway that anyone can use to restore their capacity for genuine emotional connection. Write in the comments, "I understand the protection," if you recognize how sometimes our emotional limitations might actually be serving our spiritual growth. The specific roadmap for healing that Cayce provided in reading 34431 represents one of the most comprehensive spiritual transformation processes ever documented for overcoming patterns of infidelity and sexual manipulation. This wasn't just advice for the Detroit teacher. It was a universal blueprint that any soul could follow to restore their capacity for authentic love and break free from destructive karmic cycles. The first stage of this soul-cleansing process involved what Cayce called genuine confession, but this went far beyond the conventional understanding of admitting wrongdoing. The individual needed to confess not just to the people they had hurt in their current lifetime, but also to what Cayce termed the universal creative force, the divine source from which all love and creative energy flows. This confession had to be completely honest about the motivations behind their actions, acknowledging not just what they had done, but why they had chosen manipulation over authentic connection. The second stage required a period of celibacy that served a very specific spiritual purpose. This wasn't about punishment or deprivation. It was about redirecting the sexual energy that had been corrupted through misuse and allowing it to be channeled towards spiritual development instead. During this celibacy period, the individual would gradually restore their connection to the sacred nature of sexual energy, learning to experience it as divine creative force rather than a tool for personal gratification or control. The third stage involved active service to help others who had been betrayed by infidelity. This service wasn't just about good deeds or charity work. It was about using their hard-won understanding of betrayal's spiritual consequences to genuinely help other souls heal from similar wounds. Through serving others in this way, they would complete the karmic circle, transforming from someone who created spiritual wounds into someone who helped heal them. But here's where Cayce's guidance becomes truly revolutionary in terms of long-term relationship transformation. He explained that true healing from adultery requires a fundamental shift in mindset about the purpose of sexual intimacy itself. Instead of approaching intimate relationships as opportunities for physical pleasure, emotional validation, or personal satisfaction, individuals needed to understand sexual intimacy as a spiritual practice, a sacred act that could facilitate genuine soul connection and mutual spiritual growth. This perspective completely transforms how someone approaches intimate relationships. Every moment of physical closeness becomes an opportunity to channel divine creative energy, to support their partner's spiritual evolution, and to deepen their own connection to higher spiritual realms. The focus shifts from, "What can I get from this relationship?" to, "How can we serve each other's highest spiritual good through our intimate connection?" The hidden truth behind this approach is that when sexual energy is used consciously as a spiritual practice, it actually multiplies rather than depletes. Instead of the empty feeling that often follows purely physical encounters, both partners experience increased spiritual vitality, deeper emotional connection, and enhanced capacity for divine love. Now, I want to reveal to you how this understanding of spiritual intimacy connects to Cayce's broader teachings about marriage and soul evolution, because what he discovered about the true purpose of committed relationships will completely transform how you understand your own relationship journey. Write in the comments, "I see intimacy as sacred," if you're beginning to understand how physical connection can serve spiritual growth. This understanding of sexual intimacy as spiritual practice leads directly into one of Cayce's most profound teachings about the true purpose of marriage and committed relationships. Most people think of marriage as a social institution, a romantic partnership, or a practical arrangement for raising children and sharing resources. But Cayce revealed that from the soul's perspective, marriage represents something far more significant. It's actually a spiritual assignment that souls choose before incarnating, a conscious decision to work together on specific aspects of spiritual development that neither soul could accomplish alone. This completely transforms how we understand relationship challenges and conflicts. When couples experience difficulties, when they trigger each other's deepest fears and insecurities, when they find themselves repeating the same arguments or struggling with the same issues year after year, they're not experiencing relationship failure. They're actually working on their spiritual curriculum. Every challenge is an opportunity for growth. Every conflict is a chance to develop greater compassion and understanding. The most compelling example of this spiritual partnership came through a couple from Phoenix who consulted Cayce in 1944 after the husband's affair had brought their marriage to the brink of destruction. The wife was devastated and wanted to leave, but something deep inside her kept pulling her back to work through the betrayal rather than simply walking away. She couldn't understand why she felt compelled to fight for a marriage that had been so deeply wounded. What Cayce revealed about their soul connection was absolutely extraordinary. These two souls had been working together for over 1,000 years, incarnating as partners, siblings, friends, and spouses across multiple lifetimes, consistently drawn together by their shared spiritual assignment to overcome patterns of jealousy and possessiveness that had destroyed their relationships in previous incarnations. The hidden truth behind their current crisis was that the husband's affair wasn't just a moment of weakness or a betrayal of trust. It was actually the culmination of a spiritual test that had been building for centuries. In a lifetime after lifetime, these souls had struggled with the same dynamics. One partner would become possessive and controlling out of fear of abandonment, while the other would rebel against that control through emotional or physical infidelity. They had been trapped in this cycle for a millennium, never quite managing to break through to the deeper understanding that would free them both. The husband's current affair represented their soul's final attempt to resolve this ancient pattern. If they could work through this betrayal with genuine forgiveness, spiritual understanding, and a commitment to growth rather than control, they would finally transcend the karmic dynamics that had been limiting their love for centuries. But if they chose to separate in bitterness and resentment, they would likely continue this same pattern in future incarnations until they eventually learned the lessons their souls needed to master. The impact of this revelation completely shifted their mindset about their marriage crisis. Instead of seeing the affair as evidence that their relationship was doomed, they began to understand it as their greatest opportunity for spiritual breakthrough and authentic transformation. Now, I want to explore with you the specific spiritual practices that Cayce recommended for couples working through betrayal at this soul level, because his guidance provides a roadmap that any couple can use to transform their deepest relationship wounds into opportunities for profound spiritual connection. Write in the comments, "I recognize my spiritual assignment," if you're starting to see your relationship challenges as opportunities for soul growth rather than just problems to solve. The profound realization that completely transformed this Phoenix couple's approach to their crisis was understanding that the husband's affair wasn't simply a moral failure or moment of weakness. It was actually the climactic spiritual test that their souls had been building toward for over a millennium. This perspective shift from victim and perpetrator to spiritual partners facing their ultimate challenge changed everything about how they approached the healing process. Cayce explained that this kind of betrayal represents what he called a soul crossroads, a pivotal moment where the accumulated karmic patterns of lifetimes either get transcended through conscious spiritual work or become even more entrenched through reactions of bitterness and revenge. The couple's decision about how to respond to this crisis would determine whether they finally achieved the kind of spiritual love that transcends physical incarnation or remained trapped in the same destructive cycles for future lifetimes. The specific practices that Cayce provided for their healing journey went far beyond conventional marriage counseling or communication techniques. He prescribed a daily meditation practice where both partners would spend time in quiet contemplation, asking for divine guidance about how to serve each other's spiritual growth rather than trying to get their own emotional needs met. This fundamental shift in focus, from "what can I get from this relationship?" to "how can I serve my partner's highest spiritual good?" began to transform their entire dynamic. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of Cayce's guidance was his instruction about practicing forgiveness as a spiritual discipline rather than an emotional exercise. Most people think of forgiveness as a feeling. When you stop being angry or hurt, you've forgiven. But Cayce taught that spiritual forgiveness is actually a conscious practice of cleansing the soul of resentment and fear, regardless of whether the emotions have resolved. This meant that the wife needed to practice sending love and healing energy to her husband daily, even when she still felt devastated by his betrayal. It meant consciously releasing him from karmic debt in her prayers, even when part of her wanted him to suffer consequences for his actions. This wasn't about condoning his behavior or pretending the affair hadn't caused real damage. It was about preventing the creation of new karmic entanglements through her own reactions to his choices. The husband's spiritual work was equally challenging. He needed to practice what Cayce called humble service, consistently looking for ways to support his wife's spiritual growth without expecting immediate forgiveness or trying to manipulate her emotions through grand gestures. His transformation required accepting full responsibility for the spiritual damage his choices had created, while simultaneously releasing his own guilt and shame through conscious connection with divine love. The hidden truth behind these practices is that they create what Cayce called spiritual momentum, a positive energetic force that can actually heal ancient karmic wounds more quickly than would normally be possible. When both partners commit to serving each other's spiritual evolution rather than protecting their own egos, they tap into accelerated healing frequencies that can resolve centuries-old patterns within a single lifetime. Now, I want to reveal to you the most profound teaching that Cayce shared about forgiveness at the soul level, because what he discovered about true spiritual forgiveness will revolutionize how you understand healing from any kind of betrayal. Write in the comments, "I choose spiritual discipline," if you're ready to approach forgiveness as a conscious practice rather than just waiting for the feelings to change. The most revolutionary aspect of Cayce's teaching about spiritual forgiveness challenged everything most people believe about healing from betrayal. He explained that genuine forgiveness of adultery doesn't mean forgetting what happened, pretending it didn't cause real pain, or even necessarily staying in the relationship. True spiritual forgiveness requires something much more profound, understanding that the betrayal was actually part of larger spiritual lessons that both souls needed to learn for their evolutionary advancement. This perspective transforms the entire experience of being betrayed. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of someone else's poor choices, you begin to recognize that your soul actually participated in creating this experience as a way to accelerate your spiritual growth. The betrayal becomes a spiritual assignment, rather than a random tragedy, and your response to it determines whether you graduate to higher levels of consciousness or repeat similar lessons in future relationships. The perfect example of this transformational understanding came through reading 14963, when a housewife from Miami contacted Cayce after her husband had left her for another woman. She was completely devastated, not just by the loss of her marriage, but by what felt like the complete destruction of her identity and future security. She had devoted 23 years to being what she thought was the perfect wife, and his abandonment left her questioning everything she believed about love, commitment, and her own worth. What Cayce revealed about her spiritual journey completely reframed her understanding of this painful experience. The reading explained that her soul had actually incarnated specifically to learn about unconditional love, love that doesn't depend on others' behavior, choices, or reciprocation. Her husband's betrayal and abandonment weren't evidence of her failure as a wife. They were precisely the catalyst her soul needed to discover a deeper source of love that existed independent of any human relationship. But here's where the reading became even more profound in terms of personal transformation. Cayce revealed that this woman had spent multiple lifetimes perfecting subtle forms of emotional manipulation designed to control others through guilt, sacrifice, and martyrdom. She had become masterful at making people feel obligated to her through her excessive giving and self-sacrifice, then using their guilt to control their behavior when they didn't respond as she expected. Her husband's affair was actually a form of spiritual rebellion against these control patterns. His soul had reached a point where it could no longer tolerate being manipulated through guilt and obligation, even though her conscious intentions were loving. His betrayal forced her to confront the hidden truth that much of what she had believed was selfless love was actually sophisticated emotional manipulation, designed to ensure she got the devotion and security she craved. The journey of healing that Cayce outlined for her required letting go of the victim identity that felt so justified and instead taking responsibility for the ways her own patterns had contributed to the relationship's destruction. This didn't mean blaming herself for his affair, but recognizing that her controlling behaviors had created an environment where authentic love couldn't flourish. Now, I want to explore with you the most shocking revelation that Cayce shared about pre-incarnation soul choices, because what he discovered about how souls actually plan their most painful experiences will completely transform how you understand your own life challenges. Write in the comments, "I take spiritual responsibility," if you're beginning to see how your painful experiences might actually serve your soul's growth. The profound revelation about the husband's affair being a form of spiritual rebellion opened up an entirely new understanding of how souls interact at levels far beyond our conscious awareness. While his actions were undeniably wrong and caused real damage, Cayce explained that his soul had essentially reached a breaking point with the subtle but persistent control patterns his wife had developed over lifetimes. His betrayal wasn't just about sexual attraction to another woman. It was his soul's desperate attempt to break free from energetic bonds that were preventing his spiritual evolution. This insight completely transformed how the Miami housewife could approach her healing journey. Instead of remaining trapped in victim consciousness, asking, "Why did this happen to me?" she could shift her mindset to, "What is this experience trying to teach me about my own patterns?" Her response to the betrayal would determine whether she used this crisis to develop genuine unconditional love or remain stuck in cycles of victimhood and resentment that would follow her into future relationships. But here's where Cayce's revelation becomes truly mind-bending in terms of spiritual mechanics. The reading revealed that this woman's soul had actually chosen to experience this specific betrayal before incarnating into her current lifetime. At the soul level, before taking physical form, she had consciously selected this painful experience as the most effective way to learn about releasing control and developing trust in divine love rather than human relationships. The hidden truth behind this pre-incarnation choice was that her soul recognized something her conscious mind couldn't accept. Only through experiencing profound betrayal could she finally learn to let go of the control patterns that had been limiting her spiritual evolution for centuries. Her higher self understood that no amount of gentle guidance or gradual learning would be sufficient to break through the sophisticated manipulation strategies she had perfected across multiple lifetimes. This revelation about pre-incarnation soul planning completely revolutionizes how we understand our most painful life experiences. The betrayals, abandonment, and heartbreak that feel so random and cruel from our human perspective are actually precisely orchestrated spiritual assignments designed to accelerate our evolution in ways that comfort and ease never could. Our souls actively participate in creating the very experiences our personalities most want to avoid. The transformation in understanding this brings is both liberating and terrifying. It means that we're not victims of random circumstances or other people's poor choices. We're actually co-creators of our experiences, including our most painful ones, and every crisis is an opportunity to graduate to higher levels of consciousness and authentic love. The behind-the-scenes spiritual reality is that souls often spend extensive time planning their most challenging incarnations, carefully selecting the specific people, circumstances, and experiences that will provide optimal opportunities for growth, even when those experiences involve betrayal, loss, and profound emotional pain. Now, I want to delve into the specific case study that perfectly illustrates this soul-level planning process, because what Cayce discovered about ancient wounds carrying forward into current relationships will show you exactly how past life betrayals create present-day relationship challenges. Write in the comments, "I chose my lessons," if you're beginning to understand how your soul might have participated in planning your most challenging experiences. The most compelling example of how ancient spiritual wounds create present-day relationship challenges came through a young nurse from Seattle who contacted Cayce in 1938, completely bewildered by her own emotional reactions. She was in a loving relationship with a kind, faithful man who had never given her any reason to doubt his commitment, yet she found herself consumed by intense jealousy whenever he spoke to other women, even in the most innocent professional or social contexts. This woman's journey to understanding began when she realized that her jealousy was completely disproportionate to any actual threat in her current relationship. Her boyfriend was genuinely devoted to her. His interactions with other women were appropriate and transparent, yet she would experience waves of panic and rage that felt like life-or-death responses to imagined betrayals. The transformation in her perspective started when she began questioning whether these reactions might be coming from something deeper than her current circumstances. What Cayce revealed about her soul's history explained everything. In medieval England, this same soul had been married to a nobleman who kept multiple mistresses while publicly humiliating her for her inability to bear children. He would bring his lovers to their home, parade them at social gatherings, and openly discuss her inadequacies while lavishing attention and gifts on women who could give him what she couldn't. The emotional devastation from that incarnation had created a spiritual wound so deep that it had carried forward into her current lifetime. The impact of this ancient betrayal was manifesting as what appeared to be irrational jealousy, but was actually her soul's traumatic memory responding to perceived threats that didn't exist in her present relationship. Every time her current boyfriend interacted with another woman, her soul was essentially reliving the humiliation and abandonment from centuries earlier, creating emotional reactions that had nothing to do with his actual behavior or intentions. But here's where Cayce's guidance becomes truly profound in terms of healing ancient wounds. He explained that until she could heal this past life betrayal through conscious forgiveness and spiritual understanding, she would continue to attract relationships that triggered these same fears. Even if her current relationship survived her jealousy, future partners would unconsciously activate these same wounded patterns until the underlying spiritual damage was addressed and resolved. The hidden truth behind these carried forward wounds is that they create what Cayce called emotional magnets that draw us toward people and situations that will recreate our unhealed traumas. Our souls keep presenting us with opportunities to heal these ancient injuries, but until we approach them with spiritual understanding rather than just emotional reaction, we remain trapped in cycles that can persist for lifetimes. This woman's case illustrates how many relationship problems that we think are about our current partners are actually about unresolved spiritual wounds from previous incarnations. The jealousy, possessiveness, fear of abandonment, or inability to trust that sabotages our relationships often has roots that go far deeper than anything happening in our present circumstances. Now, I want to share with you the specific healing meditation that Cayce gave this nurse, because his technique for accessing and healing past life wounds provides a roadmap that anyone can use to transform ancient spiritual injuries that might be affecting their current relationships. Write in the comments, "I carry ancient wounds," if you recognize patterns in your relationships that seem to come from somewhere deeper than your current experiences. The specific soul healing meditation technique that Cayce provided to the Seattle nurse represents one of the most powerful methods ever documented for healing ancient spiritual wounds that affect current relationships. When she asked how she could possibly heal from betrayal that had happened in a past life she couldn't even remember, Cayce's answer revealed something extraordinary about the soul's capacity for self-healing and transformation. He explained that the soul remembers everything, even when the conscious mind has no access to those memories, and that through daily quiet contemplation, she could ask her higher self to reveal the spiritual lessons hidden within her jealousy patterns. This wasn't just meditation in the conventional sense, it was a direct communication process with the part of her consciousness that retained full awareness of her soul's journey across multiple lifetimes. The practice involved spending time each day in complete stillness, asking her higher self specific questions about the spiritual purpose behind her jealousy. Instead of trying to suppress or overcome these feelings, she would actually invite them into her awareness and ask what they were trying to teach her about love, trust, and spiritual growth. This approach transformed her jealousy from an enemy to be defeated into a teacher to be understood. But the most revolutionary aspect of Cayce's guidance involved the practice of sending love and forgiveness to the nobleman who had betrayed her in medieval England. Even though she had no conscious memory of this man or that lifetime, she was instructed to spend time each day consciously directing healing energy toward his soul, understanding that his actions had been part of a larger spiritual drama that both souls had agreed to experience for their mutual evolution. The transformation that resulted from this practice was nothing short of miraculous. Within 6 months of following Cayce's guidance, the nurse's jealousy had completely disappeared. But more importantly, she had developed a profound sense of compassion for her current boyfriend, and a completely new capacity to trust in divine love rather than trying to control others through fear and possessiveness. The behind-the-scenes spiritual mechanics of this healing involved what Cayce called karmic release, where conscious forgiveness of past life wounds actually breaks the energetic cords that had been keeping her trapped in ancient patterns. By sending love to her past life betrayer, she had freed both souls from the karmic entanglement that had been affecting their spiritual evolution for centuries. The impact of this transformation extended far beyond just eliminating jealousy. She reported feeling a connection to divine love that made her completely independent of others' behavior or choices. She had learned to love her boyfriend from a place of spiritual abundance rather than emotional neediness, which paradoxically made their relationship stronger and more intimate than it had ever been. Now, I want to explore with you how this understanding of spiritual healing connects to Cayce's broader teachings about using difficult relationships as accelerated paths to spiritual awakening, because what he discovered about souls who successfully heal from betrayal will completely transform how you approach your own relationship challenges. Write in the comments, "I choose healing over control," if you're ready to transform your relationship fears into opportunities for spiritual growth. This transformation that the Seattle nurse experienced illustrates one of Cayce's most profound teachings about the hidden purpose behind our most challenging relationships. He explained that souls often consciously choose difficult incarnation circumstances because struggle and adversity can accelerate spiritual growth in ways that comfort and ease never could. This doesn't mean we should seek out betrayal or remain in harmful relationships, but it does mean we can use even our most painful experiences as catalysts for profound spiritual evolution. The mindset shift this creates is revolutionary. Instead of seeing relationship challenges as evidence that something is wrong with us or that we're victims of bad luck, we begin to understand that our souls have actually designed these experiences to help us develop spiritual qualities we couldn't access any other way. Every betrayal becomes a classroom. Every heartbreak becomes a doorway to deeper compassion and authentic love. The perfect example of this spiritual gift disguised as relationship trauma came through reading 5311, when a successful banker from Dallas contacted Cayce after discovering his wife's long-term affair. He was devastated, not just by her betrayal, but by his complete shock at discovering it. He had thought their marriage was solid, their communication good, and their connection genuine, yet she had been involved with another man for over 2 years, without his having any awareness of it. What Cayce revealed about this man's spiritual journey completely transformed his understanding of what had happened. The reading explained that his wife's affair wasn't primarily about her attraction to another man. It was actually a reflection of his own emotional abandonment patterns that had persisted across multiple past lifetimes. Rather than focusing on her betrayal, he needed to examine his own chronic emotional unavailability and develop the capacity for spiritual intimacy he had been avoiding for centuries. The hidden truth behind this situation was that in lifetime after lifetime, this man had been physically present in relationships while remaining emotionally absent. He had perfected the art of appearing devoted, while keeping his heart safely protected behind walls of work, intellectual pursuits, and surface-level pleasantries. His partners consistently felt emotionally starved, leading them to seek the deeper connection he was unwilling or unable to provide. His wife's affair was essentially a mirror reflecting back to him the emotional abandonment he had been unconsciously inflicting on his partners for lifetimes. She had turned to another man not just for physical intimacy, but for the emotional presence and spiritual connection that her husband had never learned to offer, despite his genuine love for her and commitment to their marriage. The impact of this revelation forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own relationship patterns. His journey of transformation required him to develop the very qualities of emotional vulnerability and spiritual intimacy that terrified him most, using his wife's betrayal as the catalyst for becoming the kind of partner he had never been willing to be before. Now, I want to reveal to you the most shocking aspect of this case, because what Cayce discovered about the karmic connections between all 3 people involved will show you how complex spiritual relationships can span multiple lifetimes in ways that seem almost impossibly intricate. Write in the comments, "I see my emotional walls," if you recognize patterns of being physically present, but emotionally unavailable in your relationships. The most shocking revelation about this Dallas banker's situation emerged when Cayce delved deeper into the karmic connections between all 3 people involved in this complex relationship triangle. What he discovered was so intricate and precisely orchestrated from a spiritual perspective that it seemed almost impossible to believe, yet it explained every confusing aspect of their situation with startling clarity. The banker's wife wasn't just having an affair with a random man she had met and fallen for. The soul she was involved with was actually someone who had been the banker's abandoned partner in a previous incarnation. In that past life, the banker had emotionally neglected and eventually abandoned this person, leaving behind unresolved karmic debt and deep spiritual wounds that needed to be healed across lifetimes. This meant that all 3 souls were actually working out an ancient karmic triangle that had been centuries in the making. The wife's affair wasn't a coincidence or simple attraction. It was part of a carefully orchestrated spiritual drama, where each soul was playing a specific role in helping the others learn essential lessons about love, trust, and emotional availability. The banker was experiencing the abandonment he had caused others. His wife was learning about the complications of seeking fulfillment outside committed relationships, and her lover was working through his own patterns of being drawn to unavailable partners. The transformation this understanding brought to all 3 individuals was profound. Instead of seeing each other as enemies or obstacles, they began to recognize that they were actually spiritual partners, engaged in a complex but essential healing process. The banker's journey required him to develop genuine emotional intimacy rather than just reacting to his wife's betrayal. His wife needed to examine why she had sought connection outside their marriage instead of addressing their relationship issues directly, and her lover had to confront his pattern of being attracted to people who weren't truly available for authentic partnership. The hidden truth behind this situation was that true healing for all 3 souls required learning to love without possessiveness, to trust without controlling, and to forgive without conditions. These weren't just relationship skills, they were advanced spiritual capacities that could only be developed through exactly the kind of challenging circumstances they were all experiencing together. Cayce explained that how they handled this karmic triangle would determine their soul's evolution for lifetimes to come. If they could work through these ancient patterns with genuine forgiveness and spiritual understanding, they would finally be free to experience authentic love in future incarnations. But if they responded with bitterness, revenge, or continued manipulation, they would likely find themselves repeating similar patterns until the spiritual lessons were finally learned. The impact of this realization completely shifted their approach to the crisis. Instead of focusing on who was right or wrong, they began working together to understand the spiritual curriculum they had all agreed to experience before incarnating. Now, I want to explore with you the most revolutionary teaching that emerged from Cayce's work with complex relationship triangles like this one, because what he discovered about the ultimate spiritual purpose of adultery will completely transform how you understand the deepest meaning of love itself. Write in the comments, "I see the spiritual triangle," if you're beginning to understand how your most challenging relationships might actually be serving everyone's spiritual growth. The profound understanding that emerged from these complex karmic triangles led to one of Cayce's most revolutionary insights about the ultimate spiritual purpose of adultery, revealed through the case of a librarian from Portland who contacted him in 1942 after making a devastating discovery. After 20 years of what she believed was a loving, faithful marriage, she had uncovered evidence that her husband had been having multiple affairs throughout their entire relationship, systematically deceiving her while maintaining the facade of a devoted family man. The transformation in her understanding began when Cayce's reading revealed that her soul had actually incarnated specifically to learn about unconditional love, the kind of love that exists independent of others' behavior, choices, or reciprocation. Her husband's pattern of betrayal wasn't evidence of her failure as a wife or proof that their marriage had been meaningless. Instead, this devastating revelation was precisely the catalyst her soul needed to discover a source of love that transcends human relationships entirely. But here's where Cayce's insight becomes truly revolutionary in terms of spiritual understanding. The reading revealed that her husband's chronic infidelity wasn't just about sexual attraction or moral weakness. It was actually a spiritual cry for help from a soul that had become trapped in cycles of seeking validation through conquest because he had never learned to connect with divine love within himself. His pattern of affairs represented a desperate but misguided search for the spiritual fulfillment that only comes from authentic connection to higher consciousness. Each affair was an unconscious attempt to fill a spiritual void through external validation. But because this approach could never satisfy his soul's actual needs, he remained trapped in increasingly destructive patterns of seeking something he could never find through sexual conquest. The hidden truth behind his behavior was that his soul was actually calling out for spiritual healing, but because he had no understanding of divine love or inner connection, he could only express this spiritual hunger through the limited language of physical intimacy and external validation. His affairs weren't evidence of his lack of love for his wife. They were symptoms of his complete disconnection from his own spiritual essence. This revelation completely transformed how the librarian could understand their entire marriage. Instead of seeing herself as the victim of a deceiver, she began to recognize that both of their souls had chosen this challenging incarnation as a way to learn essential spiritual lessons. Her journey toward unconditional love required experiencing betrayal without becoming bitter or closed-hearted. His journey toward authentic spiritual connection required experiencing the emptiness of seeking fulfillment through external means until he finally turned inward. The behind-the-scenes spiritual reality was that their souls had actually designed this painful experience as a form of accelerated spiritual education that could accomplish in one lifetime what might otherwise take centuries to learn through gentler means. Now, I want to reveal to you the specific spiritual practice that Cayce gave this librarian for responding to betrayal in a way that would accelerate her spiritual evolution, because his guidance provides a roadmap for transforming even the deepest wounds into pathways to divine love. Write in the comments, "I see the spiritual hunger." If you're beginning to understand how destructive behaviors might actually be misguided searches for spiritual connection. The specific spiritual practice that Cayce provided to the Portland librarian represents one of the most advanced techniques for transforming betrayal into spiritual awakening. Instead of encouraging her to leave her husband, fight for her marriage, or seek revenge, Cayce taught her something he called spiritual detachment, a revolutionary approach that would allow her to love her husband without being destroyed by his choices, while simultaneously protecting herself on practical levels. This spiritual detachment practice required a complete transformation in mindset. She needed to learn to see his chronic infidelity not as evidence of her unworthiness or failure as a wife, but as his own spiritual struggle, a soul-level crisis that had nothing to do with her value or lovability. His affairs were his spiritual assignment, his opportunity to learn about the emptiness of seeking fulfillment through external validation, and her response to his choices would determine her own spiritual evolution. The practice involved daily meditation, where she would consciously send love and healing energy to her husband while simultaneously creating energetic boundaries that prevented his destructive behaviors from damaging her own spiritual development. She learned to love him as a soul in struggle while making practical decisions to protect her emotional, financial, and physical well-being. This wasn't about being a doormat or enabling his destructive patterns. It was about achieving the spiritual maturity to respond from divine love rather than ego reaction. The transformation that resulted from this practice was extraordinary. Within 2 years of implementing Cayce's guidance, the librarian reported that her entire life had been revolutionized. She had discovered a connection to divine love that made her completely independent of her husband's behavior or anyone else's approval. She could love him spiritually while making clear-eyed decisions about their relationship's future. Most importantly, she had found peace regardless of whether their marriage survived. But here's where Cayce's teaching becomes truly profound in terms of spiritual evolution. He explained that souls who learn to heal from betrayal without becoming bitter or closed-hearted actually accelerate their spiritual development in ways that can take lifetimes to achieve through other means. The experience of being deeply betrayed forces the soul to confront its deepest fears about love, trust, and worthiness. And when these fears can be transcended with spiritual understanding rather than just emotional reaction, the soul develops what Cayce called spiritual immunity to others' actions. This spiritual immunity doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means developing such a strong connection to divine love that you can remain open-hearted and compassionate regardless of how others choose to behave. The hidden truth is that souls who achieve this level of spiritual maturity often become powerful healers and teachers for others, struggling with similar challenges, because their own journey through betrayal has given them wisdom and compassion that can only come through direct experience. The behind-the-scenes spiritual reality is that these souls have learned to distinguish between human love, which is conditional and fear-based, and divine love, which is unlimited and fearless. Now, I want to explore with you how souls who achieve this spiritual immunity often discover gifts and capacities they never knew they possessed, because what Cayce revealed about the ultimate purpose of these painful experiences will show you why some souls actually choose to experience profound betrayal as part of their spiritual curriculum. Write in the comments, "I choose spiritual immunity," if you're ready to develop the kind of inner strength that remains unshaken by others' choices. The souls who achieve this spiritual immunity through healing from betrayal often discover something remarkable about their own capacity to help others navigate similar crises. In reading 696.3, Cayce explained that individuals who have successfully transformed their own betrayal wounds into spiritual wisdom naturally become powerful healers and counselors for others struggling with infidelity and relationship trauma. This transformation from wounded soul to spiritual healer isn't something they consciously choose or train for. It emerges naturally from the depth of understanding they've gained through their own journey. Their spiritual strength and hard-won wisdom make them uniquely qualified to guide other souls through the darkest moments of betrayal, because they've walked that path themselves and emerged with their hearts not only intact, but expanded. The behind-the-scenes reality is that these souls develop an almost supernatural ability to see through the surface drama of relationship crises to the deeper spiritual lessons at work. They can help others recognize when their reactions are disproportionate to current circumstances because they understand how ancient wounds create present-day triggers. They become bridges between the world of human emotion and divine perspective, helping people transform their most painful experiences into catalysts for spiritual awakening. But here's where Cayce's teaching reaches its most profound revelation about the ultimate purpose of adultery and betrayal. He explained that these devastating experiences actually force souls to make a fundamental choice between two completely different kinds of love. Human love is based on conditions, expectations, and fear. It depends on others behaving in certain ways to maintain our sense of security and worth. Divine love, on the other hand, is unconditional, unlimited, and fearless. It flows from our connection to the infinite source of love itself. The hidden truth that Cayce revealed is that betrayal experiences strip away all the illusions that keep us dependent on human love, forcing us to either close our hearts in bitterness or discover the divine love that exists within us, independent of anyone else's choices or behavior. Souls who choose to remain open during this spiritual crisis often discover spiritual gifts and capacities they never knew they possessed. These gifts might manifest as enhanced intuition, the ability to sense others' spiritual struggles, healing abilities, or simply a presence that brings peace to people in crisis. The journey through betrayal has burned away the ego's need for external validation and revealed their authentic spiritual nature, which naturally radiates divine love and wisdom to others. The transformation in mindset this creates is revolutionary. Instead of seeing themselves as victims of others' poor choices, these souls understand themselves as spiritual beings having human experiences, capable of maintaining inner peace and love, regardless of external circumstances. Now, I want to reveal to you the most shocking aspect of Cayce's teachings about the future evolution of human relationships, because what he predicted about how humanity will eventually transcend these painful patterns will completely transform your understanding of where we're all heading spiritually. Write in the comments, "I radiate divine love," if you're ready to discover the spiritual gifts that emerge when we choose unconditional love over conditional human love. The future that Cayce envisioned for humanity is one where souls eventually transcend these painful patterns of betrayal and control, evolving into what he called spiritual partnerships, where two individuals support each other's divine connection without losing their own authentic spiritual essence. He predicted that souls who learn to heal from betrayal with this kind of spiritual understanding are actually pioneering the relationship models that will become normal in future incarnations. These evolved souls learn to love without possessiveness, to trust without naivety, and to commit without controlling, becoming living examples of what genuine spiritual partnership looks like. They demonstrate that no betrayal is too deep to heal, no wound too ancient to transform, and no relationship too broken to teach us about the eternal nature of love itself. If you've stayed with me through this entire exploration of Edgar Cayce's profound teachings about adultery and spiritual evolution, it tells me something important about your own spiritual journey. You're not just casually interested in relationship advice, you're seeking the deeper understanding that can transform your most challenging experiences into catalysts for spiritual awakening. This is exactly the kind of transformational content I'm committed to bringing you, week after week, diving deep into the spiritual teachings that can revolutionize how you understand life, love, and your soul's evolution. If this resonates with you, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together, exploring the profound wisdom that can turn your greatest struggles into your most powerful spiritual gifts. Leave me a comment saying, "Divine love guides me," if you made it all the way to the end. I read every single comment, and I'm genuinely curious to know how many souls are ready for this level of spiritual understanding. If this exploration has touched something deep within you, a simple like would mean the world to me. It helps me know that this content is reaching the people it's meant to serve. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, exploring how to recognize your own past life patterns in current relationships. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey into spiritual understanding is just beginning.